Hello and welcome to what is possibly the last episode of the All Stats No Res podcast, your premier Dominions 5 podcast, and the last one standing. We'll have to rename it for 6 because I don't want to pump strategies that may be obsolete. I am HP Munchcraft, one of the co-hosts, joined by fellow co-hosts Soran and co-host Ravsier today. No Darkwolf, no Charlie, just the three. And what we are going to be discussing today is the game design of Illwinter Game Design, or specifically the design elements of Dominions 5, how they compare to other strategy games and older iterations of Dominions, because I think this is a pretty I think this is a topic worth talking about because clearly Illwinter's doing something right because we all love this game, and clearly they're doing something wrong because more people don't love this game. So, I think it's worth examining some of the design choices they've made.
Well, I think we can talk about the kind of game that Dominion specifically is, because it's a little bit different from a lot of other games out there. Although you can make some pretty obvious comparisons.
Yeah, Dominions is like a weird turn-based strategy game that is an auto battler in one sense, but also has a lot of depth that you wouldn't expect
Right.
from a game. And it's like depth that is built up over like 20 years that has been modified through the iterations of the game. Some of that modification being really good changes, and others taking away from the core concept, a lot of people would argue. Um, for example, like there's been a lot of like hate to certain mechanics like either thugs or SCs that some people would argue is not needed, but you know,
We will probably argue isn't needed.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it was probably necessary in maybe one version of the game, but Illwinter's like way of changing their game has always been this heavy hand approach where they don't really when they make a change, it's like a triple nerf instead of like
Right.
putting one change out. And this is kind of, I would, in my opinion, been for the worse, where they had a really cool mechanic, and then instead of like slightly toning it down, they just like take a sledgehammer and slapped it.
Yeah.
Um, that's my opinion. Other people can disagree, but Dominions it's an interesting game going back. Um, it both requires a bunch of micro, but it allows you, if you don't have the micro, to get that power fantasy feel you wouldn't otherwise.
I
So yeah.
agree with that. To be a little bit more specific, it kind of takes the what would in a lot of games be more of a very complex turn-based battle or a very micro-intensive real-time strategy battle,
And then
kind
auto
of call it
resolves it.
kind of
Yeah.
game you want to do it. Yeah, then just auto resolves it. There's a
Yeah,
lot
and
of setup beforehand, and a lot of thought that goes into it. But you don't actually micromanage the battle itself.
Right. Yeah.
and that's definitely
It
appealing.
it it works like an auto battler, and it worked like that before the term auto battler was even a thing. so it's now been grandfathered into having auto battler elements, which means that you don't end up with the resolution problems of like Civ or Age of Wonders, where it's like, well, you can auto resolve things and it's super boring, or you have games where they go in and you do a sub battle like the Total War series, where you do a minor battle, but then because everyone's getting to micro their small battles, it drags the turns on and makes the game unplayable. Instead, you just go in, you script your armies to the best of your ability, and then your armies fight like an auto battle.
Yeah, another unique thing about Dominions, now that I'm thinking about it, is that the games out of any game I've ever played, especially in multiplayer, take longer than anything I've ever played. It's very like D&D esque that it
Right.
takes like literal months. Like a normal game, even with 8 players, will take you like 3 to 4 months, if not more, on average. If you die early, of course, you might be in there maybe a few weeks or even
Right. Uh,
nothing. But
Granted, we are talking it's months if we're playing on the servers, which we do, where people go in, they put in their turns, once per day. And I think this Illwinter may have intended it to be played differently. I think if you had a dedicated group of friends that all had like a scheduled time slot, then you could end a Dominions game in like, I don't know, a few 3 to 4 hour sessions on
Yeah.
weekends.
Well, I mean, the problem with playing Dominions for long periods of hours, like I'm sure you guys have experienced, is
Yeah.
after a certain period of time, your brain just goes to mush, and the game just gets harder. It just gets harder.
The longer you go, the harder it gets.
Right. While the difficulty is ramping up because you're researching more complex strategies.
Yeah, and the micro gets worse. So I'm pretty confident that a lot of the people who watch this podcast have not played short timer blitzes, right?
Oh yeah,
if you're playing a 10-minute timer blitz and you're on turn 40 and you have like 5 forts, that is not easy to manage.
No,
it becomes a real issue.
You don't view the battles. You're just looking at the report.
You basically go to the default of what you think will work or what you think is powerful, and you stop trying to innovate, which can take something away from the game. Although the pace and tension of it can be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, well, it might be closer to how Illwinter plays the game themselves or intends to play it, but I do think that like the actual play and counterplay of the big battles where you have a long time to analyze, because of the way that this community does turns, a longer time to analyze the fight than any other auto-battler, and then get to come up with counter strategies.
Dominions is really a game of like, when you're playing against someone, it's like, especially when you attack them, you're offering the handshake of, this is what I'm doing, or what I'm showing, and it's up to you in order to answer it. And I think that is like kind of cool. Dominions is like a game, instead of focusing on reaction speed and adaptability, and being able to like be very quick, but making the correct decision. It's more about the strategy versus the reaction, which some people might not value. I personally, when I think of like, this is my own hot take. When I think of like the term real-time strategy, I'm thinking like, oh, that top level player is really outsmarting the other players, and he's doing it in real time. But most of that RTS in those games, at least if you've ever watched something like StarCraft or Warcraft, Age of Empires, a lot of it can be like dominated by reaction time, but making the correct choices. Like it's not exactly like 50-50.
Reaction time becomes a skill floor for the top levels, where you have to.
That's true.
The top levels can be strategic and you can outsmart your opponent with your build, but there becomes a floor where you have to have a certain amount of reflex, motor skill in order to actually play the game the way it's meant to be played. In an RTS, like for example, StarCraft 2.
Yeah, you have to have a quick.
StarCraft is a very micro-intensive game. Even among RTSs, it's pretty heavy on the micro.
I believe there's a young kid who became a pro, and his name is like Seb or something, and he has like some of the fastest APM ever. But he does react like correctly, but he is so fast in that, and that's what how he dominates other players in that space. And when you're doing like 600 actions per minute, that's a definite skill in those games, and it's less so about necessarily the grand strategies of things, but he's so dominant, almost like an AI, where he's literally attacking you everywhere. It's like, oh,
right.
But
you could do that in Dominion.
Obviously, these games are more than that. Like, don't think like we're talking too much out of it. We are a little bit, because like obviously RTS is more than just being very fast. There's a lot to it, but
there's a lot of other strategy context that you have to have before you can make.
Like you have to know build,
you could not make an RTS as complicated as Dominions without driving people insane. Basically,
yeah. I mean, RTS, like the one thing Dominions lacks is quality of life. It has more than the first one for sure, but the QL is definitely not there. But I would argue that Dominions is still conceptually a better design than some turn-based strategy games in terms of like if you're aiming to get like a big battlefield field like in a game like like in like Civilization or Age of Wonders. I was talking about this before the podcast, but like there comes a point when you get a bunch when you're trying to make a big army, just moving that army every turn is cumbersome because you have to select everything one by one. Like a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
modern
no.
a lot of modern like real turn-based strategy games, they don't have a box select. So this is your Age of Wonders 4, your Civilization. Clicking on every fucking unit every turn and then moving them individually when you have like 20 or something is ridiculous. And Dominions just does it better where you can like mass select stuff. You have to script it, but it's not
To an
as
extent.
bad.
Well, once you learn the
I do want to raise
hotkeys,
a point there as well, though.
if
Like,
someone is new and is watching this and is like, "What the fuck are you talking about? The scripting is awful," press question mark and look at some of the hotkeys. Being able to shift click and control click to add things to your control groups or add large amounts of units or commanders to your control groups at one time is basically essential for playing this game uh, with any quality of life when you get to the mid to late game. So, on the off chance anyone's listening and didn't know that, do that.
Yeah,
Look at those
that's what I wanted to
hotkeys
bring up.
and start to use the troop movement hotkeys because it will make your game a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to compartmentalize strategies and dominions. Like, you're not going to necessarily place every single unit or every single commander. Like you can if you want to get specific, but it's not necessary. It's way too taxing on your time, especially if you're working or your mental like doing this. So
You're right.
like most people are just they're gonna have overarching strategies like, oh, I'm gonna have like an 8-8 communion, and that's when I'm gonna run at certain forts or whatever. You got 4-4 Skelly Spam or whatever. They have a turbo, maybe they're Utgard, which is getting changed in 6th. Um, so there's like certain like blueprints you could say. Not a lot of like dumb YouTubers like kind of give people like blueprint strategies. Uh, Arguably, we should probably showcase some of those at some point. But
Yes and no.
Well,
I definitely think there's like some setups like you can like have in Dominions that like make it easier to script. Like, oh, I'm gonna do a GSS setup. I know it works. I'm gonna place it slightly behind my troops, and if I run into an ESC that looks like this, he should do. It should work, but it also depends on what your opponent is doing. But
right. Or to go back.
Counterplay is always possible, but I did want to bring up a point.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
I don't think the total number of clicks in a turn is ever actually really, most of the time anyway, less than like a Civilization or whatever type game. But I think each turn is, for one, the units are more cohesive, and for another, it feels more impactful. Like,
Yeah.
in Civ, you might move like 4 or 5 guys, and that's your army, and then Dominions, your army can be like 20 mages and 300 troops, and that just feels a lot more impactful to move on the map. And when it's in a battle, it feels more
Well,
important, more
yeah.
visceral. I don't know.
You could have larger units, but then sometimes, like for example, with the Total War series, because you're buying them in blocks of units, you're fundamentally still moving not that many guys around. So it's a 300-man army in Dominions is more impactful than a 300-man army in a Total War game, for example.
Well, we could talk about that. I think like it's an interesting comparison. Certain strategy games give you the block format of single selects, and then Dominions you don't have that, but you get a similar feeling because you can mass select. So Total War does block selecting. I believe the first RTS that did it was the Battle for Miller series 1 and 2. More so 2.
Did that come out before Dawn of War?
There's a lot.
Yes, it does.
There you go.
No, not. Yeah, it came out before Dawn of War. Battle for Miller. I guess Dawn of War 2 did that. and Dawn of War.
Dawn of War
Or
didn't.
no, wait. Oh, the original Dawn of
Yeah, the original Dawn of War, because they had.
War. No, the original Dawn of
That's.
War
I
came
don't
out.
think that's true. When was? Because
Yeah, the original Dawn of
Praetorians
They're
War
did
came
that in
out
both
before.
ancient.
2003.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Did
2003, there was a game called Praetorians released that allowed you to move
Oh,
troops in
oh,
blocks.
Conan also has squad-based combat. But these
It
are
was
all going to
very
be
common back in the day, and I don't know how common it is now, but it probably is
well,
still common.
like the squads are more so 5. Like Total War, you have like squads of like 100, and then in
Praetorians
modern,
was like 20 to 30. I don't know, somewhere in there.
yeah.
like squad based combat is definitely something that I like in games.
Well,
I think
I'm
Dominions,
on.
like, I don't necessarily think Dominions would be improved by it, but it's if you made the combat squad based, I don't think it would take a whole lot away from the game. But I did
Well,
want
I
to
think
point
it
out
would.
that
Well,
It
not
would take
everything
time.
is quote unquote squad based.
Like, I want to consider something, HP. Like, consider the turbo expansion build that you did on, like, Late Age Home, as an example.
oh yeah
You
yeah
kind
yeah
of lose the concentration of power that you get with individual sacreds being able to be invested in to the point where, like, 3 of them can take a province, including the commander, right?
right.
So, I don't know. I think it would lose something if it was squad based. Not too much, like you said, but it would be a little different and probably a bad way, in my opinion. So,
I
that's
don't.
just me.
It's an interesting design approach. I definitely dislike how like Civilization has like its one unit aesthetic.
Right.
At the very least, the aesthetic. It's like, oh, my army is a single spearman, and he's knocking down the city. I don't like that visualization. I'm personally not a Europa slash
Well,
whatever
those
that is,
those
Crusader
games
Here's
Kings
on.
have
enjoyer.
Yeah.
famously poor combat mechanics because the game isn't fundamentally about combat.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not.
Well, and I do want to transition there. I want to say, and this is somewhat a meme, but it's 100% serious at the same time.
Uh,
Dominions 5 is a war game.
yes, yes, it is.
It is compared a lot to 4X's, but I'm not even sure I believe it because
So
the economic part and the exploration part of 4X's is, I mean, it's there to an extent, but it's also not really there, if you get what I mean.
started
It's a war game.
right. So yeah,
oh,
You took growth. It's a war game.
no, I have started
People
recording
there
again. By the way,
doing economic development. It's a war game, bro. There's no economy. You can't build a tax
there's
office.
no
well,
naps.
sort of.
You can't
It's a
hold me
war.
to
You
my
can
word.
you can build.
You can't build a freaking road. Okay, it's a war game.
True.
Remove war
There is
roads. There used to be
economic
roads.
aspects
They
to Dominions,
removed
but they
roads.
are far less than the military aspects. So that is something I enjoy about the game because it is a game about fighting other players and sometimes fighting NPCs. It is not a game about sitting in your castle and playing Lego blocks with yourself and
It's
building up your
literally,
economy.
it's literally like Valhalla. Like you're here to brawl with other people. Like you're going fisticuffs, and
Right.
sometimes it just becomes a hectic FFA where everyone like it's a mosh pit. Just start swinging.
I mean,
Yeah,
you
it's
do
like
you do lose a little bit of aspect because of that because it's like, well, there's do I rush or do I eco is a choice you have in games, but in my opinion, the benefits of just having like no, you don't get to just sit there and eco. Like no, you can't just build money that gets you more money, right? Like
Yeah, you have to take money in order to get
right.
money. The loot
Or
loot mentality.
you could take increasing money on your scales, and in that
yeah,
case, you get it ambiently if you manage your Dominion spread, which is another subsystem. Um,
yeah. I mean, there are economic aspects of the game, and you can influence them. It's just a lot less interactive
right.
than the military aspects. And I mean,
Specifically,
there's a
you are never going to sit there queuing up workers for a bunch of shit. You're never going to sit there building
yeah
houses so you can have enough houses for your units. You're never going to
for
be
your
like,
people.
"Oh, I need to build a mine on this copper deposit so I can, you
Yeah,
know,
you just go to the province and the copper mine is already
right.
there.
That's the peasant's job. That's not your job. That's what you whip them for. You like
Yeah, your job is to become the supreme ruler of the world. I mean,
right,
I
you're
don't
a
know, bro.
Oh,
god.
do
You
we want
don't care
to
about the detail.
mention that? Like, so like Dominions has become like this war game. You could argue, but like conceptually, it was more like they were trying to immerse you, kind of like D&D style. Like, I don't know if they intended it to be like a war game. Like,
Well,
it,
they
I,
definitely intended it to be some kind of war game because they have armies and units as the main blocks of interaction
Yeah, they have a
is
battle screen, like a battle report
yeah,
screen. That
right is combat.
signifies war game to me.
yeah. Bring back the Autobattler function.
I mean, it still exists, but you just can't set it up custom like you used to be able to.
But I do kind of agree with you, Soran. I feel like the Dominions has a lot of RPG elements, and it feels like the designers intend it to be played in a much more role play game RPG aspect, uh, immersive aspect than it actually is played by players, especially at the top level. Where a bunch of goblins, where we'll be like, all right, I want this bless to win. You take this bless, and this does this, and then you mechanically win a bunch of shit, and you take your opponent's
Yeah,
land.
because I mean, like, think about the events. You have like certain like national event chains, or
Right.
you have like, or you have the dungeons. You can like sift away your guys into a endless
You can
hole and get
throw your buddy
nothing.
into a hole.
Yeah, it doesn't. That never. They're generally never worth it because it's like it's an idea,
you
but it's implemented so poorly. It's
well,
like,
you could
Oh,
actually
this
game the adventure sites, but doing so is so asinine. I started recording a video and then stopped. Like,
it's so bad that he won't even use it for YouTube
like
content. It's actually bad.
I could, but it's like I don't know
And
if I
this
even
guy plays
recommend it.
Gary Grigsby's War in the East too,
Right? Yeah.
and he's not willing to go into the nitty gritty of adventure
oh,
sites.
So
I'm thinking about all these games that are coming to my mind that are similar to Dominions in some way.
Well, to touch on the RPG thing really briefly, there are a lot of RPG aspects that just aren't there as well. Like there's
mm,
in RPGs, a lot of the role playing aspect is there's some sort of character development over time,
right.
right?
But you're in a nation.
The character development in Dominions is the god gave you a weapon, or you've killed enough people that you're more experienced now, and that's
I,
about it.
well,
And
that's not strictly true because
okay, well, you can get a
there's
heroic trait,
emergent.
and you can also be disfigured in battle or whatever.
Well, there's emergent storytelling there. There's like the being disfigured in battle, or like a frog becomes your friend, or whatever. But
But
you've like
there's no overarching narrative
no,
there.
there's no
I,
overarching narrative. There's little minor narratives that occur because of the way events in the game go that create
okay, so
drama and the
it's a
texture of the
war
world.
focused emergent strategy 4X auto battler.
Yeah, I feel like it's
Good
more
And
like an
God.
auto. Like what? So what games are like an auto battler? Like I feel like the Ogre Battle series are kind of similar, but very dumbed
Yeah.
down. Mechabellum is your modern one we've been playing.
Yeah, we've been.
Um,
well, the
Uh,
reason I think
what else is
Dominions
there?
lends itself to a comparison to Total War is like if you scooped out the RTS battle of Total War and you replaced it with an auto battler, you'd get something that looks really similar to Dominions in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Well,
that
Because
is correct.
Total War is a lot more economic focused on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's like you have a strategic map in which you build the force that you will use in the battle to uh, grant you strategic advantages, strategic
Right.
victories and things. And then you put it into a tactical setting and you have to face the opponent's strategy there. And that's probably like the key similarity between the two games. That's kind of where the comparison is drawn. I can't think of a lot of other games who do it like that.
So
I mean, there's a game that directly kind of took Dominion's thing. I don't know if you guys have ever played Wizard Warfare on Steam.
Never
And
heard of it even.
it's like an
Never
indie
even
game
heard.
that's like basically like Dominions, but like no sprites. And I don't know.
Give me the name again. So I can...
Wizard Warfare. And then the other game I know that kind of has like the battle report system that's similar to Dominions, but the problem with that is like in their battle report, like everything is predetermined for the turn. Like there's like you can interact with battles in Dominions, but you can't in this other one. That it's like this pig simulator game. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that looks a lot like Dominions, actually. It's like a
There's
mix between
let me
COE.
find it actually. I remember seeing it a while back.
There's like this fort battle or whatever, and it looks like COE without unit sprites.
Let me find you the pig game I'm referring to.
Wait, do
So
they? So if they don't have unit sprites, do they just have like fucking NATO
They're like
counters?
counters. They're not NATO
yeah,
counters. But
Just have
I
NATO
tried
counters.
playing it. It's like I don't know. It's like
what even is?
watered down Dominions times a billion.
Yeah.
It looks a lot like COE. I'm just gonna leave it at
Let
that.
me find that the weird.
It's
hog
like the
game.
sprites are simplified.
You're we don't
I don't
need
know
to
how
know
to
the weird
say
hog game,
that
but if you
COE
want to find it, then go for it.
Are we sure this isn't a COE ripoff?
No, it's more like
Druid,
Dominion.
Gas, Tough Hide. It's in between. The battle looks like COE.
Also, in Dominions, comparing
could
it
be
to other
Dominion.
auto battlers, the other auto battlers, no
Are
other
we
one
sure
has a.
this isn't a ripoff of Dominions? And
God damn it,
COE?
Rob CA. Fuck off.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the other thing about Dominions and auto battlers is I don't think any other auto battler allows you to have the fine control that the 5 script slots per commander lets you have in Dominions. It's
Oh yeah, the script.
you're not just putting
I
things
found it.
down. You have this entire magic system you interact with, and then you fucking plug that into a script, which causes a lot of micro. If you cut down to 3 spell slots, the game would go a lot faster. But you'd also have players be like, "Oh, why only 3?" If you cut that down, players would complain. Because they're
The
used to the
scripting is
5.
probably what makes the auto battling so good. By the way, the game I was referring to with the pigs is called Ymir. It's a weird. They have the only thing that's similar about the minions is they have the auto battle esque thing, but it's like predetermined. But yeah, that was the only thing I could think of. But yeah, the scripting in Dominions is what really makes it, I guess, very different than other games and gives you unique combat, as you were saying.
So, welcome, Darkwolf. We
Yeah,
are
without
podcasting
scripting, Dominions would suck.
literally
tell you
right
guys.
now about the. This is just creating more space for me to have to edit out.
That's
It was
because
this
Darkwolf
actually-
is a menace.
You should have Darkwolf come in and like me do the soundboard, and then you just cut to that.
Just a little dark wolf. It'd be funny to just show me
All
showing
right,
up to make it.
so that's all right. So I did want to bring it back to the RPG elements, because there's this game, Conquest of Eodor Genesis, which, if you've heard of it, you've probably only seen Lucid Tactics or General Confusion, I think, of the 2 guys who've played it on their channels. But it is this Russian fully turn-based, like Heroes of Might and Magic, RPG strategy hybrid game. It's very slow. But what it does really, really well is kingdom development within the context of like the RPG mechanics. And what I mean by that is you have in your provinces, you have your sites like you do in Dominions, but in that game, the sites are guarded by monsters. And so you have to send in adventuring parties to clear out the sites, which sometimes then give you an economic benefit, or sometimes they're just a site where you get treasure. So comparing that to Dominion's event system, which, by the way, is absolutely wretched. Like, we have all these random events and quest changes, but like half of them are broken. Half of them are like not worth interacting with. You know, you have all these things laying around to like make RPG-ish stuff happen, but there's not really an incentive to get the players to do RPG-ish stuff or to like, to incentivize that at all. And so I think something Dominions could improve on if Dominions does want to refocus on those RPG elements or make those more prominent is you could improve the event system. You could add dungeon locations that actually have things in them that isn't just a random table somewhere off in the distance that where you have to clear out in order to get a side effect. You could add, for example, everyone hates the Brigand Lair. Everyone sees the Brigand Lair, they fucking hate it. They want to kill it. So do like what Conquest of Elysium does. Have an event chain where you can patrol the brigands out, and you could go and enter the Brigand Lair with an adventuring party and fight them, and then if you win, the Brigand Lair goes away. And then on the other hand, you could have when brigands take over a province, if they keep it for 3 or more turns or something like that, you could have them establish a brigand lair there. So a lot of these things on the map that are RPG like elements and site elements could be they're in the game, but they're kind of atrophied in their current form, and I feel like they could be pretty easily brought up to speed and made into a core part of the gameplay, and especially kingdom management.
I have a couple comments on that.
Yeah.
First is that right now it either feels as if you run into something and there's either A, no way to interact with it, like there's a Hellgate, this province has unrest forever, you can patrol it and kill everybody in the province, good luck.
Right.
Or it's like a simple reaction. Barbs are about to attack, station an army to defend. Brigands are in the province, patrol them out, brigands are gone. Right?
Right.
That's the majority of interactions. And one of the reasons for that is that in competitive multiplayer, the common setting is to turn story events off.
That's true.
Right? Because one of the things that some of the things that can happen in story events is somebody can lose like 90% of the pop in their province, and then a powerful necromancer appears, and they start attacking them.
Right.
And they will
Then
just
you have
spread violently. And
the Amazon.
In a competitive setting, being attacked by independents early in the game for no payoff and just getting griefed by them is pretty unbalancing, right? Like you can just lose because I have to deal with 400 aggressive indies, and the guy, one nation over doesn't, so he can just focus everything on coming and killing me while I'm busy fighting.
I do want to point out two things related to your point, Rav. The first is I do want to point out that usually people do play with story events on, but it's major story events off, minor ones on.
I'm sorry.
So you can get small, less impactful event chains, but not the big, like, fuck you event chains.
None of them are good either.
Right.
They're all just like, by the way, this person appeared,
fuck you.
and they really don't seem to want to, worship your pretender with you, and now they're going to show you what they mean about that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that with these things,
there's no reward.
The reward and the punishment are mismatched. Well, you get a necromancer's lair when the necromancer comes.
Yeah, you get a sight, but
it's 2 gems and like some range. That's not.
But the province is dead, and they can kill other provinces too.
The core problem is
maybe when you kill the necromancer, you should get a bunch of gold and a bunch of magic items. Maybe when the necromancer sends stupid ass Bane lords to attack your province, says they should be thugged out with gear, and you should be able to steal it off of them.
The real reward is the friends we made along the way.
Right.
Welcome to the podcast. Who is this man?
Welcome to the podcast, Nicknight.
This is Nick at Night.
Listen,
I like how you introduce yourself as Nick at Night now.
Come on, Rob. Let me see my spiel.
I
I think the major problem with major story events is like that the payoff is just outrageous for like what you deal with. And the other major aspect of having major story events in multiplayer is you're playing multiplayer to play against other players, not to have the AI randomly show up and grief you. You play multiplayer because the AI is not enough and it is not interesting enough. So like that's why a lot of people don't have it on. You want to see what players do. They have the interesting scripting and strategies. The AI has like a very shotgun approach of whatever the hell they want to send at you.
In
So
my experience, every time a major story event has occurred, it's been a free capital for the guy not dealing with the major story event.
Right.
yes, the Amazon Queen, please.
Yeah. Maybe if
400
you're playing the game
Amazons.
more casually and you're role playing with your friends, then the story events that become engaging because you all like, oh, the necromancer is threatening. We must all blah 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 blah, blah band
Well,
together. And,
From what I hear, though,
I've seen a Phlegra fail expansion in the second turn and then have his cap sieged by a random werewolf event. So
well, I was just gonna say, if you want to have an engaging PvE experience with your friends, you can play Legendary, which is a mod,
By
which is
executive.
explicitly designed for that purpose. To
couldn't
kind
you,
of
couldn't you also play the Elysium game? What is it called?
Right.
Conquest of Elysium.
Conquest of Elysium. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, the game by the hit studios Ill Winter. Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I've heard that they should really, the
Add kobolds to the
Winter
game?
guys could really take a page out of the COE guys and put some kobolds in the game. That's what I heard.
yeah, I've seen a review to that effect. In fact.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy seemed pretty knowledgeable. He had more than 20,000 hours, so.
More than Lucid Tactics? Never.
In fact,
Warfare
if you look at
Lucid
the
Tactics?
review with the second most hours, which is more than 11,000 actually, it's also a negative review. It's quite sad.
That is sad. I can't believe you'd keep playing a game that you hated so often, so much.
For 11,000 hours, indeed.
Yeah, so surely you wouldn't play for 20,000.
Now we're fucking memeing. So that is another like going for the RPG elements to the single player, because that is kind of a seamless transition. It's another negative aspect of the game that the AI is just bad at the game. Like
It's hard to make them good.
a very engaging single player experience. You can get probably more out of it than the Dominions community likes to admit. The AI is better than the Dominions community likes to admit that it is.
The multiplayer community, at any rate.
Right. Because people will say, like, oh, don't play the AI, there's no challenge to it, you must play multiplayer. And in a sense, that's true, because the AI, if you develop a strategy where you cheese the AI, or you develop a tactic that they can't naturally counter, then they will never be able to counter it. The AI is incapable of critical thinking. If you cast Body Ethereal on your guys, the AI, if they don't have magic weapons in their army roster, they're fucked. But I dare you to take one of these dirtily ass multiplayer builds that takes a bunch of scales and some bone grinding dick dildo statue and then has no early game potential, and then set it up on a 15 profits per player map surrounded by a bunch of AIs that are on impossible and aggressive. And then most of the multiplayer players will flop because they will not be able to deal with a horde of chaff that early with a late game build. You see people, they insult multiplayer, and then they insult single player, and then when they play single player, they take more aggressive builds, because early is when they're being pressured in a single player.
We've even sort of seen that. Rob, how enjoyable was fighting AI Relay as Joman?
Oh, yeah, that's not fun at all, especially when they free spawn and it's an impossible AI and it's been expanded by a player. Yeah, not fun. They just auto spawn a billion chaff because the AI cheats.
It turns out chaff pretty good at.
The AI,
they at least, it's like the Scalaria problem, right? Like, you can kill their armies, but you have to keep killing them over and over again.
It's worse. It's worse than the Scalaria problem, because at least when you're fighting Scalaria, your mages don't constantly go insane.
True. My contribution was going to be, I do think that there's plenty of challenge in single player, and I have played like a few hundred hours of single player at the very least. I don't know exactly how much before I did switch to multiplayer. Um, and when I made the switch, to me, I just found the multiplayer on so many different levels so much more engaging. It's not as frustrating to me, and most of the time, because you can actually talk to your opponents and be like, "Wow, how did you do that?" or whatever, right?
Right.
And you know that some amount of thought was put into what they were doing, right? They made the build themselves, at the very
Right.
least, you know, and they decided what their mages would do, or if their mages should do nothing at all. You know, like there's another human person there, and at the same time, you're not just going to be mindlessly attacked for no reason by all of your neighbors at some point. Like you kind of
Oh,
you still
Well,
surely.
you
do.
might
I mean,
be. You
it's
might be.
possible, but it's so much
Surely
less
not.
likely. Like you can go talk to them or whatever, and be like, "Hey, I just killed your army. Can you?" And you have like one province bordering me now, and you've been invaded by another neighbor. And like 95% of the time, the human player will be like, "Yeah, I have a bigger issue." AI doesn't care. They'll just keep running at you, right?
Yeah,
Like
you
they'll
have
be
to.
blatantly suicidal, even though there's no possible way for it to work.
Listen,
They're,
some
you know,
Dominions
it's
players do that.
So
not to the same extent.
right.
Like
Yeah, what's the
they do it
message?
out of spite. The
What's
AI
the
does it out of not being
The
capable
AI
of doing
sends you at the
anything else.
start. We're gonna destroy your unholy nation.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
How bad is the AI? Let us count the ways in which the AI in this game flops. First off, it's a game of builds, and the AI random builds. They do not follow any coherent builds. That you may be able to change that by adding your own builds to the AI in 6, but right now you can't just put like, oh, I want to see the Meta Vanheim as an AI and then have that as a challenge. The AI will just take some random thing. Or to do that, you would have to join the game as the Vanheim, make
Set
the build
yourself
yourself,
AI.
and then
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
AI to get out of the game.
I was about to say
And
that.
then even after you do that, the AI is just gonna recruit like the
Right.
non-sacred troops.
Then the AI, yes, then the
Then the
AI
AI
doesn't
recruits
know.
Deer Tribe and Militia and Serfs.
The AI doesn't know what to recruit. Now, to an extent, that's fine because you get to see a cross section of units in the game, but the AI has absolutely no idea of what to spend its money on.
Better at recruiting
I'm
short shit bows than Darkwolf.
I'm actually really curious how on earth they even made the AI. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know how
don't
much
know.
background on that they have.
There's
The
no.
guy, the guy
They're
who,
good
the
and
guy who
said
made
that.
the guy who made the Civ 6 AI, same guy.
Then there's no guidance on how the AI researches spells. I think you can mod that, but but what
Can you?
the AI will do. There's some AI hints in the modding thing that I don't know
Hmm.
exactly what they do, but I believe you can. You
Is
may
that for
not be able to
casting or
affect
for
research, but
research?
I think you can mod the AI to be better. I know you can mod what it recruits. Um, but it's in the modding commands. It's not
You
in the
mod what
base.
they recruit by telling them, "No, you're too stupid. Don't make that."
Right, but like the AI, like they don't know what to recruit, they don't know what to research, and then once they've researched it, they don't know what spells to cast. They'll just auto cast spells with the casting AI, which then has its own problems. There have been multiple mods of different people putting their own, myself included, putting their own flavor on the casting AI to try to like fix it up. But when you add all those issues together, they just compound until the AI just sends forth this universal mass of unscripted nonsense at you. And then at a certain point, like the national distinctions start to break down, and it kind of doesn't matter because the AI's mages aren't casting anything super relevant, and their armies aren't their armies aren't composed of anything super relevant, so the normal play counterplay cycle you'd see just doesn't apply.
I mean, it does teach you some fundamentals about the game. It's not completely useless to play
Yeah,
against the AI in single player. Like, knowing how to efficiently kill stacks of trash could be useful information to obtain
yeah,
for your nation.
it's definitely useful, and there are players like we've said in multiplayer who will shit talk to AI all day, but then if you play like the AI and just recruit a horde of trash and roll it at them, then they'll flop to
Also,
it.
in a multiplayer environment where people set themselves AI, knowing how to quickly and efficiently eat an AI opponent is a valuable skill.
That is also true.
Yeah, hopefully your host doesn't set the random AI to impossible like an asshole. But yes.
Yeah, just go AI and nuke the map with hordes of garbage.
Yes. Surely a host has never done that. Surely not.
Yeah, at any point where you can say, well, the most damage I can possibly do to you is by going AI.
Dude, many such cases.
I don't know. I have fun playing it out a lot of the times.
But
Even
Well,
when I
you should
don't.
play it out. It makes
oh
a
no,
better community.
I just meant there's a lot of cases where a player goes AI and does more damage.
Than they
Because
would.
Yeah.
Well, you
I'm-
see, the AI cheats for money. So if you have one province and no traceable income, you can't hire 6 mercenary companies and start raiding people. But the AI can because they get free money. So
also the AI, if you set somebody AI, it still preserves their scripts. So if you script your mages to be casting good buffs and then go AI, often you can end up with this horde that is buff stacked like a real army.
Also, the AI at least knows how to spam elementals.
Right.
Oh, no, those are getting nerfed in 6.
We'll see.
we'll see how it goes. I'm worried that they're over nerfing some things, but I think that's a common fear to have.
I'm not gonna comment on that until I see it.
Honestly, if Magic Weapons has been made in Incarnate Bless in 6, that is going to be a very big buff for Fire and Air Elemental specifically.
Yeah, but both of those are
Definitely.
going to change.
Yeah, okay. I'm not going to say too much. I don't
I'm
know how
gonna-
it'll turn out.
So that was part 1 of 2 of the finale of the All Stats No Res podcast, talking about the game design of Dominions 5. Obviously, this was recorded a while ago, before Dominion 6 released. Tune in next time when we will finish it out.